I'm Fernanda. I'm a real estate researcher and academic. I completed my PhD at the University of Aberdeen in 2024. And since, even before finishing my PhD, I've been teaching basically at different universities in the UK and then visiting lectureship in Cyprus as well. My research my PhD research was on around flex workspaces as tenants and their impacts in the space market and asset market, and also how corporations are adopting flexible workspaces. I recently co-authored a book, The Income Approach to Property Valuation, which is a well-known textbook for valuation. So super proud about that. I'm originally from Brazil, which gives me a slightly different perspective on real estate markets and real estate academia and so on.
So, what inspired your transition from civil engineering to real estate and academia?
So in Brazil, real estate is not separate from civil engineering and architecture. In Brazil, we don't have a dedicated course, at least at undergraduate level, and at least when I did my undergrad. So the transition was very natural for me. It was an elective course that I took, property valuation. And then, yeah, after concluding my studies at an undergrad level, I started working with banks and doing mortgage valuations. And then I went to a conference and learned about the Royal Institution of Chart Surveyors. And that changed a little bit of my mind because I thought it was super interesting that in the UK and other countries have a dedicated course for real estate and a master's degree and so on. So I decided to pursue that. So first I did my master's at the University of Reading. And my topic of dissertations at that time, so I was doing my master's in 2018, 2019. And at that time, WeWork was taking a lot of space. It was the hot topic, and I was very interested in that. So my dissertation topic for my master's was on co-working spaces and how they price the membership. And I was very lucky to find a scholarship at Aberdeen as searching for people researching exactly that. So I was very lucky that my research from my master's was I was able to evolve that for my PhD. So I just went for it. So my to answer your question, my transition from civil engineering to academia really happened through my research on flexible workspaces.
Yeah, and what motivated you initially to pursue a PhD? And also, what was your initial process for narrowing down a broad interest in real estate into a specific thesis?
Yeah, so I was after I finished my master's and as well as doing my research on co-working spaces, I thought it was really interesting and something that I would like to delve it even deeper. The masters went like super quick, went by super quick. So I would like to research more. I do love research, so that's one of the reasons why. And then, as I mentioned, it was just a coincidence to find a university with the scholarship open in the same topic. So I was very, very happy coincidence in that regard. And in terms of narrowing down flexible workspaces, well, as I mentioned, WeWork and other flexible workspace providers were taking a lot of space. But then when I started my PhD, it was a question on what kind of perspective I'm going to take. So I read a lot, and in the literature review, there was a lot of how people interact in those kind of places and more of a community literature on community in those kind of places. And I saw that there wasn't a lot of their impact, the flexible workspace as tenants' impact in rents and cap rates, so a more quantitative aspect of the sector and also the business models of flexible workspaces. So, I mean, how I narrowed down it was basically being interested in a topic, reading a lot about it, and finding the gap. I feel like right nowadays it's a lot easier to find a gap. There are a lot more resources that students can rely on in terms of AI. It's a lot easier to find the papers and narrow it down and find a gap. But yeah, that's how it worked for me.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And how would you say your research at the University of Aberdeen has influenced your approach to teaching and professional practice in the years that followed after your PhD?
So I mean, again, I was really lucky at the University of Aberdeen, not only because of the topic, but also because of my supervisors. I had two fantastic supervisors that I still keep in touch, Dr. Nan Leo and Dr. Norman Hutchinson. And they were always very supportive and always making sure I'm also not only doing my research, but participating in conferences and career development activities, research presentations within the business school. So all of that made definitely made an influence on my professional practice. But the thing is, I started in Aberdeen in 2019, at the end of 2019. So not too long after I started my PhD, the pandemic hit and everything was online. And I was just starting tutoring for some modules. But then the campus closed down and everything was fully remote. So I was delivering tutorials online, and then at that time it was also new for everybody, and students were struggling. Undergrad students were struggling with all the yeah, I mean all the adversities of doing everything remotely and so isolated. So they wouldn't open their cameras, and for me as a first timer, tutoring the modules was very like difficult to gauge if they were there, if they they were following what I was explaining, if they were even paying attention. So that was very challenging, but also made me realize how the dynamics of teaching were changing in terms of it's not only a slide with content that you debate, it's also activities and questions that you ask. So it made me rethink teaching in a way that it needs to be more dynamic, and it definitely changed it definitely influenced my teaching philosophy, and it pushed me to design classes to be as dynamic as possible, making sure I'm teaching the tools that are used in industry and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. During COVID, it must have been quite a challenge to kind of start out teaching. But going back to your research, so some of your recent research revolves around flexible workspaces, commercial real estate liquidity, and valuation. How would you say the real estate sector is evolving from when you were a student, particularly in those areas?
Yeah, so in terms of flexible workspaces, as I mentioned, a lot of operators were taking massive amount of spaces. And then the pandemic hit, and then all we read on the news was, well, the office sector is dead, and the high street retail is dead, is never coming back. And now that we're some years after the pandemic, we're seeing that those were, those were exaggerated claims. But at the same time, we have now AI that is kind of changing things in terms of occupier demand and how we deal with our lives. So I feel like that's the main thing in the sector from when I was a student to now. It's in terms of coming back to normal in a world post pandemic, but at the same time, we're coming back with AI, and we're still trying to navigate in terms of occupancy. A lot of firms are using AI pilots for valuation, leasing, and underwriting. So it's different, it's challenging. It's not something that it's still set in stone, it's still evolving. So yeah, I think that will be the main thing.
Yeah, those are some good insights. But along your journey, were there any specific courses or mentors that had a lasting impact on you?
Well, my mentors, definitely my supervisors, my colleagues at Aberdeen, the my peers, the ones that were also pursuing the PhD. Fiona Stoddard, which is a corporate real estate lecturer at the business school. She's awesome. Yeah, so I was very lucky to have a lot of mentors during my time in Aberdeen. In terms of skills and courses, I feel like learning. So because I came from a background of civil engineering, I didn't have a lot of training on the financial side of things. So when I was an undergrad, I decided to take a course in Coursera from the University of Michigan on time value of money. And I feel like that course, even though it must be like 15 years that I took that course, I still think about that because it was so important to understand time value of money and then now working with valuation and teaching valuation, it's really important and something that sometimes I annoy my students with because it's really important to get the basics right. Other than that, so in Brazil, we do valuation a little bit different. There's a lot of talks of automated valuations now, but in terms of how things are done in Brazil, the comparative method has been done using regression analysis for quite some time. So that will be another course that I did, a regression analysis course that was very important in my career and it shaped the way I do research. So with that, taking a regression analysis course, you're gonna become curious about other things in this data analytics sector. So some other courses would be in SQL, and then I just found out this SQL Zoo, which is a website that it gives tutorials that are very interesting. Other than that, for data visualization, Tableau has some courses that I'm finding interesting, and they have an impact for me because I'm a researcher. I'm always dealing with data and making data look pretty. It's a plus. And then in terms of experiences, I think the Viva for the PhD and then all the conference presentations were really invaluable. Um, Being put in a room, not too sure about what are you gonna get in questions, and then you have to think on your feet is really important. So those kinds of experiences really have had a lasting impact on me.
Yeah, it's definitely really important nowadays to be doing some extra courses and getting some extra knowledge. But going back to the start of your education, you started off in Brazil before you then moved to the University of Reading to do your master's and then a PhD in Aberdeen. What were the biggest cultural or professional shifts that you noticed and challenges you faced moving from South American to European academia?
The biggest shift that I noticed was how integrated the curriculum is with the industry in the UK. I felt like in at least when I did my undergrad, maybe that has changed, but it was very disconnected. I was studying for the modules, I was studying for the exams, and I was completely unaware where I was going to use that knowledge or what are my career prospects. I only started thinking about that a lot later in the course, whereas in the UK, I feel that is embedded from day one through the industry conferences or when you have a guest lecture and guest lecturer in the classroom. So it's very integrated. So that was a very welcome shift. In terms of challenges, it's more, I think, at a personal level of being, well, I'm from Brazil. My family is in Brazil, so being outside um, that that bubble where you know everybody and you can meet people easier. So that was a challenge to be away from family, away from friends. But at the same time, it was something that pushed me to make new connections and make the most out of it. So overall, a positive outcome, I would say.
Yeah, and after doing your PhD, now that you've gone into teaching, how do you balance teaching with research?
I think there's not a an easy answer for that one. I feel like it's the best way I can. I think that's something most academics struggle with, especially when they are in institutions that are have a teaching have they are teaching heavy instead of research heavy. So you just carve out time as you can, and if you're lucky in which I think I was, you find a colleague that has the same interests as you, and then you start working together. But it's really carving out time and making the best of it and trying to go to conferences as much as you can. But really, there's not um, a straight up formula to find how to balance. Perhaps during the term, you're going to put the research on the back burner, but then the summer, you can use the time to build your research. And so, yeah, it's not a linear um, process at all.
Yes, it does definitely sound quite challenging, but what have you found is the most effective way to engage with students in complex topics? Of course, you mentioned that during the COVID times when you were a tutor, that was quite challenging, but perhaps there are there any methodologies you have picked up since?
I think one of the most effective things that I that I do is to connect with, I think students might already know. So, for instance, when I'm talking about the global financial crisis of 2008, I recommend my students to watch the Big Short, or and then all the times that I brought this movie in the classroom, they already watched and they had something to say. So the conversation becomes I don't know, the whole dynamic becomes a little bit more conversational instead of um, just lectureship. So connecting to things that I think students might already know, and then also asking questions. So all the institutions that I worked at, they had a lot of international students. So asking students, how are things in their home countries? What are their perspectives? So trying to bring the conversation that in a way that it's not only me as the lecturer talking, and it's more a dialogue. And also making the topic as practical as possible. I feel like in real estate is a very practical field. So in terms of if I'm talking about evaluation method, I'm going to try to bring an activity of how to use that valuation method in class. And then students are going to find information online. So it's a lot more dynamic than I mean what I had in my background as a civil engineer. So just trying to make the classroom time as effective and dynamic and interesting as possible. Of course, that's not always possible. There are some topics that are more content heavy and very like mathematical. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's just something that I try my best to make the classroom active and engaging, and that's a challenge. But yeah, that's how I engage with complex topics.
Yeah, those are some very good points. What achievements in your career so far are you most proud of?
Well, definitely completing my PhD. I feel like it took so long and it had so many challenges with the pandemic and research methods that didn't work because I needed participants, but everybody was remote. So that sort of thing. So completing that PhD was kind of, yeah, my greatest milestone so far. And then also having contributed to the eighth edition of the income approach to property valuation was massive. It's a textbook that has been around for decades and used in real estate valuation education. So being able to co-author the book was something really, really special and that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And for students interested in academia and perhaps pursuing a master's, a PhD degree, what is the most important skill they should develop early?
I think critical thinking, especially now in times of AI, where you can ask a question on ChatGPT or Claude, and you get an answer. And I feel like now it's more important than ever that you question if that answer is actually valid, if um, it has a backbone, if it makes sense. Um, so I think critical thinking is important. Reading a lot, as I mentioned to you, my literature, building a literature review, finding your gap, and using AI. I mean, don't shy away from using AI, but use it ethically and in a way that it's helping you, but also helping you think and not just doing things for you. So AIs like SciSpace and Lit Maps I use for to find what has been written in my topic. So that might help me with finding a gap or finding authors that I could read more on. Also, making sure that you're organized in terms of the literature that you're reading. So I usually point my students to reference management such as Mendeley. I think I mean, I'm certain there are others, but it's very important that you keep your papers organized so you can go back to it. And finally, I feel like networking. I feel that sometimes it's hard to network in academia, but attend as many conferences as possible, all the career developments that are available at the University of Aberdeen. Reach out to people on LinkedIn. Everybody, from my experience, people like to talk and are most of the time is very willing to help. So yeah, networking will be the another important thing.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. I'm sure our students will benefit from this. But you mentioned the importance of reading. Are there any books or perhaps even podcasts you would recommend, whether that be career related or just ones that have inspired you personally?
Well, Daniel, I think you know that I'm going to mention my book one more time. So yeah, definitely the Income Approach to Property Valuation is a great book. You should read it. In terms of another textbook that I always tend to fall to read, and it's Commercial Real Estate Analysis for Investment, Finance, and Development. It's a really good book. In terms of books outside textbook, oh no, the other one that I was just reading, which is for predictive forecasting, is an online book and it's free. So that's always a good thing. It's called Forecasting Principles and Practice. So you can check it out. It's a very good if you're interested in developing your quantitative analysis skills. Other than these textbooks, I would say the Rise of the Creative Class by Richard Florida. That's a good book in terms of thinking how creatives are changing urban dynamics in cities. And then again, Too Big to Fail. It's about by Andrew Ross Sorkin. It's about the 2008 financial crisis. So it links back to the movie that I always talk with my students, but also the book is a more comprehensive narrative of that. For podcasts, I feel like I haven't been listening much lately, but I really like the Prof G with Scott Galloway. It's not real estate specific, but sometimes he brings some guests such as Drawer Pollock and Richard Florida to the podcast. So it's interesting to hear. Other than that, I really enjoyed listening to We Crashed. Then it got turned into a TV show, I believe. But that podcast is really interesting. It tells the story of WeWork and Harvard Business School managing the future of work, just because it's around my research topic. So I'm not listening actively right now, but yeah, those are the ones that I go back to listen.
Yeah, those are some very good recommendations. And for the last question, what are your favorite memories from living and also researching in Aberdeen?
Aberdeen, it's a really special place to me. The campus is gorgeous. My office used to be at the King's College, so it's very classic, traditional looking building. So I love that environment. I love the library. It's awesome, has a great view. The real estate department was great. My supervisors, my colleagues, it really felt like a community, even though a lot of the time during my time in Aberdeen was the pandemic. So there was that. And then yeah, having coffees at the Cloud Cafe, coffee, and I don't know if the Bobbin's still around. I used to go there to watch football because I like football. I mean, Brazil is probably not gonna win this year, the World Cup, but anyway, I digress. Watching the Dons as well, that was fun. That was an activity that I enjoyed doing. And going to the parks, I must say that the beach, sometimes I would go, but it would be a bit too windy for me. So I feel like the parks in Aberdeen, Seaton Park, Hazelhead, Duthie Park, they're wonderful places. So those are my favorite memories going back to the parks and really just enjoying the university and all the community that I made there.